Welcome to this week's episode of Built and Backed. I'm super excited to have Bethany Fiocchi Root joining today. Bethany is a results obsessed marketer with 17 plus years of experience helping high growth companies scale smarter and faster. As the founder and CEO of Oceanview Marketing, Bethany works with startups to design and execute strategic marketing programs that match the stage they're in and the growth that they're after. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because of us two marketing lovers. And this is going to be such a fun episode to share what you've been working on and also give some great advice for our listeners here about marketing, whether they're a founder or whether they're a VC and looking for some advice. I know that we're going to cover it all.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Yeah. And so I'd love to start off by having you share more about yourself with our listeners and what you do at Ocean View Marketing.
Absolutely. So at Oceanview Marketing, I take the same approach I've taken my whole career is I always like to think about where is the company trying to go, right? What are your goals? What are the results that you're looking for? And then back into a very specific kind of custom plan to get you there. And so we help startups, specifically in the tech and SaaS space, move their marketing forward and do whatever it is that they're looking to do in that next stage of their business.
Amazing. And so I'm curious to hear some examples of what that might be. Like when a startup comes to you and they're like, we know we need something with our marketing, but we're not sure what it is that we need. Like, let's hear more about your services and how you support them with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it really just depends on what stage they're at and what they have done already. So if they are looking for a launch, right? Like if they are, just creating a product and they're just trying to get it out into the world, we focus on some really basic marketing things to just get them out there looking professional so that they can go and kind of focus on their product market fit from a more sales perspective. If they already have that kind of validated product market fit and they're looking to kind of grow and expand their marketing or set up sort of automated scalable solutions, then I can come in and help with that too. So it really just depends on how early stage they are versus, how much progress they've already made. But I do think that chunking it up and figuring out very specifically what is your goal and objective at this stage is the most critical thing that any startup can do because it helps you focus your time, your money, and honestly, all of your energy. Because you don't have a lot of it when you're a startup and it's all over the place. So the more focused you can be to kind of nail in on that next milestone or that next level is going to help you back into specifically what is the plan to get you from here to there.
100%. And I'm curious to hear what your background is, like what you've done in your career up to this point and what led you to launching Ocean View Marketing and going off on your own.
Sure. So I started my career in startups, and then sort of slowly made my way up into the bigger corporate, multi-billion dollar public companies. And so I amassed quite a variety of marketing knowledge and experience on how to grow marketing programs from the ground up or optimize existing programs. And I've always just had a deep excitement for tech and tech startup. I was most recently at GoDaddy before I decided to start Oceanview Marketing. And so, very high volume tech is just where I was most recently. But I love the blended opportunity to help people start from scratch or start from almost scratch, kind of putting together all that knowledge that I've had in my career and help them move forward. I am a results obsessed, number obsessed person. And so there's nothing that makes me happier than seeing, numbers on a chart go up because of the
Yeah.
marketing work that we've done together.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned the part about helping startups who might be at zero right now. Like they might not have anything. Maybe they're in stealth mode. Maybe they're like quietly building until they're ready to go live and be public with what they're building. And so I would love to talk more about that. Like, what advice do you have for startups who are in that situation when they know they need marketing, but they're like, we're not quite ready and comfortable kind of being totally live yet? What do you usually recommend they do in that instance?
Yeah, I think it depends on what their game plan is for actually going live. But at the very beginning, when you're really just trying to validate your product and product market fit, you need to have, at the very minimum, some solid messaging and positioning of where your hypothesis is of where you think you fit in the market, what problem you solve for customers, and why you're different. Like, why should people go with you? And then you go out and whether it's kind of behind the scenes selling, not public facing, those are the tools that you can kind of give your founder. You can give your, if you're a VC, you can help the founder with that. If you are the founder and you have a small team, you can help your sales team kind of get out there with that message and validate whether it's resonating or not.
Totally. And I love that you mentioned messaging and positioning because that's really like the foundation of everything. If you don't have that figured out, it makes it so much harder to have your building blocks of marketing from there. And so, what advice would you have for startups who are at that point, who they're getting ready to focus on their messaging and positioning, and they need help figuring it out exactly? Like, do you have a certain exercise you walk people through, or what's your process for helping them really understand that and have it set in place?
Sure. So I am a huge fan of testing. Of course, being data driven, that gives you some really quick insight. Now, obviously, it depends on the type of company, whether that works or not. Like whether I would spin up a meta ads test for a company will depend on the type of company that they are and what their product is that they sell or service.
Mhm.
But coming up with a solid hypothesis from the beginning is, in my opinion, one of the most impactful things that you can test, or a couple of different hypotheses. The biggest mistake I see people make is they want to be the something to everybody. They're too afraid to niche down. They're too afraid to identify who their target audience is from the beginning because they're just learning. But without having that focus and without being able to test whether you can validate that in the market, you're most likely missing out on a lot of A, data and insight, and B, you're not going to resonate with the actual person that it will resonate with because you're trying to be something to everybody.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, especially like when a startup is kind of in that stealth mode and they're working on building and they're like, we don't want to isolate like helping people. We want to be able to support a few different groups. But as you mentioned, it's so important and also can probably bring you a better return if you do get more intentional and focused about the people that you're serving. And so, what would you recommend to founders who might be in that position right now where they're struggling to really nail down who their ideal user customer, whoever it might be, is, and they're kind of ready to niche, but just don't even know where to start of kind of planning that?
I would say get on the phone with 5 to 10 of who you think your ideal customer is going to be, or a general, if you don't have a solid idea of who that person is yet, the person you think could be someone who would be in your ideal target audience, and just do a bunch of market research. Even if it's a 15-minute call, people are usually really willing to hop on a call for you, and just give you 15 minutes of their time. Obviously, make it clear that it's not a sales call,
Mm-hmm.
but to gather some information. Go into it prepared, make sure that you have a certain set of questions that you want to get consistently answered across the board of those 5 or 10 people. You're most likely going to find some insights and find some trends. People are either going to, lean into the things that you're talking about and it's really going to resonate, or you're going to get some hesitations. And that's where you really want to drill down, find out what those hesitations are, what those objections are, what the feedback is, because that's how you're going to be able to tailor your messaging and even to some extent at that point, your product to fit the market.
I love that point that you just mentioned about being able to find out the hesitations or what's making people a little bit not so sure about purchasing your product or whatever it might be. I think that's key. And so the part that you mentioned too, going along with that, of doing this market research and talking to people that you think might be your ideal user or customer, whoever it might be, is so important. And this question I know will kind of be a little bit more broad. Of course, it'll be more focused depending on what the startup is. But when someone is looking to do market research, like what types of questions should they be asking? Like generally, if there's any type of like starting points or guidance you would recommend for them.
Yeah, I always start off by asking what kind of problems or challenges they're having. And you can set it up and tee it up if it's a specific point or moment or related to a specific product or experience in their life. Obviously, it completely depends on what your product does and what your industry is. But you can
Mhm.
always give them a little context, like if you were at this point and trying to make this decision, what were the problems that you were experiencing and how were you thinking that you needed to solve this problem? And this works too if you can get a mixture of people in your market research who have already solved the problem and also people who have not yet solved the problem, because you'll get to do a little bit of research on what they think is the solution, which sometimes you find out that they think it's one thing and you know it's not. And so
Mhm.
you know your marketing has to do a little bit of work for you there to connect the dots, almost like sell the thing they think they need, but deliver the thing they really need.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of question around the problems, the objections, if I were to present you with this type of solution, what would your initial reaction be? Would this fit? What would cause you to not purchase something like this?
Mhm.
There are a myriad of different questions that you want to ask, but very much around the problem and solution, and finding out a little bit about what else they are considering in the market and their objections or hesitations to what you're specifically kind of positioning, even if you're not naming your product specifically.
Yes, great advice. And I love what you shared too about just like speaking about the problems or challenges or kind of humps they might be facing. And I feel like that with a lot of these conversations that founders or anyone working for startups might find is some good like marketing tidbits that they can use. If they are getting some good conversations, they're like, ooh, this dialogue can turn into a blog post or it can lead a good social media post topic. And I imagine that's something that you kind of help your clients figure out is stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely. And I highly recommend recording those interviews or using an AI assistant to take notes for you because, to your exact point, there are going to be little snippets in there that are going to be absolute gold for you when you're going to write out your messaging, that could either, very much resonate or be the opposite if you're trying to weed people out. You can use those little snippets that you heard for that exact reason too.
Yes, definitely. And when you're working with a client on a go-to-market strategy, like what, again, this is kind of broad because it's going to depend on their startup, but like what exactly do you recommend they focus on in terms of marketing channels? Like where do you see the areas being the best fit generally for startups today?
Yeah, it depends on the goals and objectives and where they're at. If they're very, very early stage and they're specifically B2B, I recommend LinkedIn is a great place to kind of get some insights because of the potential targeting and decision makers that you can reach there. But if you have more of like a CPG product or something that's more B2C, then Meta is a wealth of information. May not be the be all end all, but especially when you are first starting out and trying to gather some insight through targeted and specific strategic testing, one of those two platforms, depending on what kind of company you are going to get you some really quick feedback that you can then move forward. Most likely, one of the mistakes that I see is that a lot of people will start thinking too far in advance. Like,
Mm.
I want to start working on my SEO. I want to start working on all of this organic stuff. And in my opinion, I think you have to nail down some core things, such as, messaging, such as getting some semblance of a conversion rate going, to make sure that you truly have settled into an audience and an ideal customer profile before you start the long-term channel planning.
Yes, and I love that you brought that up about like doing all this testing, whether it's through ads on LinkedIn or Meta, and really being able to understand conversion rate and what's making people like want to go to that next step with you and really see how they're responding and resonating with stuff. And as you said, it's so key to have that down pat before jumping to the next point. So that makes me wonder, and would love to hear your perspective on this, is when a startup has done the testing, like they know what it's working, they know how like their audience is responding to the stuff, and they are ready to go to that next stage. What might that next stage look like, and what do you recommend they do as they kind of map out their next marketing initiatives?
Sure. So that is an exercise about with forecasting, setting some kind of key performance indicators and baseline metrics, and then putting together a plan, a channel plan, that fits the company's budget and appetite that can get them to that next stage. So the exact mixture really does vary depending on the company, right? Like if you just got an infusion of seed or a Series A funding, you're going to have a lot more budget to be able to work with than if you were kind of earlier or if you're just using angels or if you're self-funding. And so that mix and that approach really does depend. However, I am always prioritizing channel planning and expansion based on sort of the bottom of the funnel. So where are we going to get buyers where they're really already ready to pull the trigger? They just need to know about you. And then you start moving up the funnel and expanding from there.
And I am so glad you brought up funnel because that is something that's pretty important and something that helps people be more strategic as they map out their different marketing initiatives. And so let's walk through that funnel if you don't mind and kind of talk through those different stages if you'd be able to explain a little bit more and kind of go into what might be a part of each stage as people go from the bottom of the funnel to the top.
Absolutely, yeah. So, a really basic funnel is kind of consideration, awareness, and conversion. And so, conversion is obviously the set of people who are already aware of the problem, already aware of your solution, and they're really kind of just need the convincing of the details, the pricing, all those things to be in line with what and the timing with when they're ready to purchase. Um, those are usually more of your, paid search. Um, Paid search is usually one of the ones that's a first go-to for that. After the testing phase, when we've kind of settled into, an ideal customer profile, then when you go into consideration, those are the people that are, perhaps have already visited your website, have already kind of started to look at, but they're not quite ready to buy. They maybe need a little bit more information, your email list, people who've already signed up for something, your email list or have connected with you on social. Awareness is the people who don't yet know about you, perhaps maybe even don't fully understand or aren't ready to recognize their own problem. But they're sort of in that like circling around that problem, but maybe not putting the right words together and like actively searching for it.
Mhm.
So moving people through that funnel is sort of the longer term play, but usually you start from the bottom of the funnel when you're building an expansion, a channel expansion or marketing program expansion over time.
Yes, absolutely. And as someone who is results obsessed like yourself, who loves all things data, let's talk about that. I mean, the one of the biggest mistakes I think you can do in marketing is throw spaghetti at the wall and hope that it sticks, or do something just to do something and not really know the intention behind it or what result it's actually bringing you. And so, could you explain more about KPIs that might be a consideration for startups? Again, kind of depends on what it is they're selling and what their goals are, but what certain KPIs they might want to keep in mind, and then also how they know like if their marketing is working, if they might need to change or change course from there.
Absolutely. It's a great question. That is the very first exercise I go through with any client that I have is we go through what I kind of call a forecast, but it's a benchmarking exercise where I take a look at either their existing program or if they don't have an existing program, we talk about just all the metrics like their price point, their goals, etc. We put together a forecast, which is basically a guess, a hypothesis of a scenario where this funnel could work for you or this overall marketing program could work for you. It's usually very dependent, especially at the beginning, on cost of customer acquisition. How much is it going to take you to acquire that customer? And then how much are you getting for it? And what is your margin in there? Those are kind of like the most basic things that we're looking at. Once you start to go a little bit further and deeper, you start looking into things like, if it's a lead generation type and not just a direct conversion, like a B2B company, what is the cost per lead? What does it need to be? That's usually when we're testing, we're looking at that kind of thing. Sometimes also click-through rate might even be a higher up metric that we're looking at during the testing phase to gauge whether our ads and positioning kind of tests resonate with potential people in the market.
Mhm.
But yeah, cost of customer acquisition is usually the number one because I think when I usually break down these KPIs, it is surprising because most business owners, I don't want to speak for everybody. Most business owners love building the product or the creativity that comes along with it, and perhaps haven't yet sat down and looked at these numbers. And it can be very eye-opening. Like, oh, we have to spend that much money in order to generate this amount of clicks, in order to generate this amount of leads, in order to get one conversion, right?
Yeah.
And so putting that together at the beginning really helps us align so that I can really have a backing for my recommendation in terms of what does our test plan look like or what does our next phase expansion look like. But then also, what would be the first metric that we have to address if the in the funnel as we're testing that we kind of can't even keep going forward until we've nailed that metric. And it opens
Mhm.
up some really, really good conversations along the way.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you mentioned. There's like there's one metric at that top that you just need to make sure you really hit the nail on the head there before you can even think about moving forward with
Exactly.
other KPIs to focus on. And I imagine
Mhm.
too that like as you're working through this data, it might show like different holes or gaps or roadblocks where it's like maybe things are going really well in the first three or four initiatives or channels, and then all of a sudden a stop. It kind of like helps you to say, okay, well, we're getting a little bit stopped here, roadblocked here. And it
Mhm.
helps you kind of think through like why that might be happening and what you can do to change it. So, and as you shared, like just being able to understand that is really, really great.
Yes, absolutely. And kind of going back to something that we were talking about earlier, combining it with this topic is at the very beginning, when you are just starting a company or just launching a new product, I always recommend focusing on one funnel first and making sure you can nail that funnel. Because to your exact point, if you hit that first metric and it's not working, you don't want five different channels feeding into that metric because then it's extra hard to troubleshoot. You want to make sure that you're nailing every part of the funnel for one channel, one funnel to start off with, and then it's almost like you earn the right to expand from there.
Hmm. And good call about bringing up the point that you could have more than one funnel as you continue to expand your marketing program. And so I'd love to hear more about that, about maybe some examples that you've worked on or seen with clients where they might have multiple funnels for what they're looking to achieve.
Sure. So multiple funnels can be generated from different products, different audiences. The audience one is an interesting one because, and I see this fairly frequently with my customers, with my clients, where we find out that they have more than one viable target market. And the skinning or the visuals or the slight, we might need a slight messaging adjustment for that audience, but that we can still get conversions from it. And so that's usually where we'll create a separate entry point for that secondary or tertiary audience and then kind of build out the rest of the funnel. Sometimes it can be an exact copy. It just needs to be kind of updated to address that specific audience. Again, messaging or visuals. Yeah, that's the one that pops into my head the most as like the most frequent use case for different funnels.
Yeah. And I am so happy you brought that up because I think that's something people might not realize or they might forget with founders specifically is that like you can have more than one like ideal user or one ideal like client or whatever it might be customer. And so being able to know that and have different funnels to plan for that is huge. So that way it goes back to your point earlier, like you're not marketing to everyone, you're being super specific and targeted with that.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And it can be so fun. It can sometimes take a while to get to that point because if you have to really you have to nail that first funnel and that first audience and then move on to expansion. And sometimes, another big mistake that I've seen is that founders can get frustrated with this process and get a little bit distracted and want to, assume that what the first audience or funnel isn't going to work and immediately want to move on to the next and try it. I understand it. I can be impatient as well. But that's why I kind of put a whole plan and a whole set of things that we can test together from the beginning. Because oftentimes I'll notice that founder is frustrated after the first one or two tests. We have five other viable tests to try to unlock this funnel. We got to keep going or we're wasting time switching contacts to this other funnel, which may work in the end, but you got to really just kind of try that first funnel as much as you can. Obviously, there's a point where you need to say enough is enough, but oftentimes founders want to quit before with that funnel before enough is enough.
100%. And that is a huge thing for founders to know is that like it takes time. I mean, it's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to your marketing and having that solid foundation and being consistent and trying rather than making the switch will give you that data. I mean, if you make the switch too quickly and change things up too often, then you're not going to have that data to refer back to. So that's a really solid piece of advice that you shared there.
Absolutely. Yep, totally.
And what is the benefit of a founder or startup hiring an expert like yourself to help with these marketing foundations and programs?
There are a lot of benefits. The main one, in my opinion, is that a founder can't wear all the hats successfully all at once. And especially if you've just gotten an investment and you have an infusion of cash and you're expected to kind of move forward and hit a specific set of milestones, you can't do all of the components that are going to take you to the next level by yourself. But you often also don't have enough budget to be able to hire an entire on staff, W-2 full-time marketing team. And so by engaging with a marketing agency such as Oceanview Marketing, you kind of get that like CMO level strategy, plus if you're, interested, the execution as well, and can help you kind of bridge that gap between where you are right now and where you need to be really quickly without having to do it yourself and without, with being able to open up some of your additional budget for other things. So it really helps you stretch it much, much further.
Yes, definitely. And you'd mentioned that one of the biggest mistakes that startups make is not testing. And also, addition to that, like not keeping their objectives and goals in mind as they're planning out their marketing. Beyond those few things, what would you say are big mistakes that you see startups making when it comes to their marketing that they definitely should not do as they're focusing on this part of their business?
Doing non impactful activities because someone told them that they should. So, for example, if you have not validated product market fit, you most likely should not be worrying too much about like regular social media posts just to drive engagement. Right? Like there are different phases of where you're at in your marketing life cycle, and there is a purpose for each one. And I've just seen people say, "Oh, well, somebody told me I should be doing XYZ. I'm not really sure, but it sounds like the right approach. So I'm just going to do it." And it's like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy is like you are actually not self-fulfilling prophecy because you feel busy and you feel like you're making progress, but then you eventually get super frustrated because you're actually not getting the return that you need to
Mhm.
get, and especially not quick enough. So that's again another benefit of engaging with someone, marketing agency like Oceanview Marketing is because we've seen it. We've seen what works at each stage and can help you focus your time and energy on the things that are going to be most impactful for you right now, um, so that you can be more efficient and effective at what you're doing, wearing all those million hats.
Totally. And you're so right. I mean, that happens often where founders are like, well, I'm doing this because my investors told me I should, or I've been told by someone else that I should. Or there's, of course, like shiny object syndrome where they're like, well, the other startups in this industry are doing it, so I should do it too.
Yes, my favorite is we need to make something go viral. No, we don't.
Viral.
Not yet. Also, that's not a strategy. That's a luck. That's luck. That's a
That's
lucky
true.
accident.
I know that is like such a common thing that comes up. Like, we need to make this thing like get seen by everyone. And it's like, well, is it going to do anything for you? Like, that's an important thing to remember too, because you brought that point up about like doing non-impactful work. If you do something that's not going to bring you the results that you're looking for or not nudge you closer to achieving the goals or objectives that you set at the very beginning, then like there's not any point in doing it. Because as you shared, Bethany, like there's only so much time and money and effort that people have to go around. So you want to be really intentional and strategic about how you use it so that you're not wasting it and kind of setting yourself further back.
Absolutely.
And one thing I'd love to hear, because this is something I love to chat about and feel passionate about, is like the importance of personal brands in marketing. So, like mirroring the founder's personal brand or leadership team's personal brand with the company or like corporate, so to say, marketing initiatives that they're focusing on. And so, what are your thoughts on that? And any advice you have for any founders who are going through that to kind of think about really setting their personal brand?
It's such an interesting topic, and I'm glad you brought that up. It has changed so much over the years. What I've seen is that, 15 years ago, founders didn't necessarily have to have a social media presence or a public presence. Their brand, having a brand and a presence was enough to do what it needed to do back then. Over the last, especially 5 years, but really 5 to 10 years, there's there's so much noise and there's so much the dawn of AI, right? Everybody's creating AI everything. And I think mostly people are craving that personal contact, that knowing that there is a real person that matters behind that brand so that they can differentiate you and the effort you put in and the value you bring to the table as a founder compared to the AI generated brand that just pumped out 500 social media posts and doesn't feature a real person.
Yeah.
um, so I do think it's really, really incredibly valuable. Also, it allows you to position yourself as a thought leader in the industry. I've seen so many founders start to do this. And I'll be honest, I was against this for a little while until I started drinking the Kool-Aid when it was recommended to me by a business coach a couple years ago. And there is so much value that can happen. Opportunities happen, doors open, speaking engagements happen, visibility opportunities happen. And when you as a founder become visible, your company inherently becomes more visible.
Yes. And it's like all goes back to the whole notion of people do business with people. And so it's like when you're being able to put yourself out there and be engaged and active and provide value to your audience and establish that thought leadership, as you said, like that will help to drive results. And it's like almost being a brand advocate, sort of say. So I love what you shared about that, about just being more upfront and consistent with using your personal brand to then drive growth to the company page or whatever it might be that you're looking to direct people to.
Right. We forget, I think as founders and business people, we forget how powerful our own network is. I think we make it harder for ourselves sometimes than we have to. And so, becoming a little more visible as a founder can tap into the existing network that you have, especially when you're early, you don't have unlimited marketing budget. That can be a way to supplement, your efforts in sort of an organic way as well.
Yes, definitely. And one thing I'm curious to hear too, because you mentioned AI, and of course that's like the hot topic right now with everything, especially with startups. For startups who are looking to incorporate AI into their marketing plans and initiatives, like what are some things that you see working well that they can leverage it for, and what are some things that they should not use AI for?
It's a great question. And I've thought about this a lot recently. I feel like this is changing. My personal opinion, what I've seen be effective is using, using AI to supplement real people's expertise and strategy to expedite results. So, for example, are there some automated tasks in between developing a strategy and kind of like launching it that can get you from that strategy development to launch or can get you to iteration, optimization and iteration faster? Tasks, I kind of like to say, if this is a task I could hire for, $15 on Upwork or something like that and give instructions for it in 2 minutes, I can probably find an AI tool that can do it equally as well. Um, that's my personal opinion. I don't think that AI should be creating giant marketing campaigns or visuals or brands. Can it maybe help you bridge a gap in a temporary setting? Yes. But long term, I think you really need human involvement for some of those major marketing or visual brand decisions if you are going to grow and become, a leader in your industry and being taken seriously. There's definitely some things that need that human touch, and then the in between can kind of be serviced by some AI assistance.
100%. I recently read this quote. I think it was like month or so ago, and I've repeated it a million times because I just love it so much, and I feel like you'll appreciate it too. But it's the whole idea of AI is meant to do mundane work for creative people, not creative work for mundane people. And so that totally just hits up the nail on the head of what you shared of like focusing on those in between gaps or tasks that founders or anyone working for a startup will need to get done that can be automated or a little bit tedious, but really focusing those big picture tasks or projects or whatever it might be for the human expertise and experience. So I love that you shared that because I think there might be like a little bit of a nudge for founders to feel like they have to go like all in on AI and use AI for everything. But I think there's so much value in not using it for everything and really being intentional about how you use it and what you use it for.
Absolutely. Yeah. It ultimately, right now, at least in my experience, is a time saver, but it shouldn't be the thing that you lean on to build your business.
Yeah, and I love that. Like you still need to have like what makes your startup you or what makes your startup like unique compared to others. And that's really where your expertise comes in and where the expertise of the builders and operators within that startup come in as well.
Yeah, and that brings me to actually another topic that I think goes along perfectly with this, but the storytelling aspect. And that goes with like the founders being more visible, and having their own brands, and sort of some of the things that you have to do at the beginning, along with that messaging and positioning, is figuring out what's your story, how do you tell that, and how does it differentiate you in the market? Because again, like you said, people buy from people. And especially at that beginning stage when you don't have a whole lot of data and you don't have a whole lot of customers to be able to have use cases and studies and talking about your experience and your founder's story can be super powerful and important.
Exactly. It's like people want to know, like, well, why should I care? And so being able to share that story, especially when you mentioned if startups don't have that data or have the success stories to lean on yet, that's what really gives them that credibility and social proof. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I feel like that can be a challenge for especially early stage startups when they don't really have the numbers to share or the results to share. Like being able to go in on their mission and their why and their story is a really good starting point for them.
Yes, absolutely.
What's one thing that you see only happening like more in marketing as we get into 2025 and even thinking about 2026? Like, what do you think should be on the radar for Start specifically when it comes to marketing in the coming year or so?
It's a great question. Things change so quickly. Obviously, there are marketing basics that just have to happen, but in terms of kind of changing trends or things that could really amplify the existing baseline stuff that you're doing in marketing, is I think use figuring out how to leverage that story in a powerful medium. And I think, video lately, especially just across the board, is a great way. There's so many different channels, sometimes even new emerging channels where you can leverage those assets. And, even at the beginning, founders can make that in their own home with their own iPhone. Like iPhones are so powerful these days. But as you grow, I think investing in the storytelling and in the video aspect, uh, kind of connects all the dots that we've been talking about. It
Mhm.
personalizes you and the brand. It is a way to, give an intriguing, engaging medium for people to learn more about your product and be taken through the funnel to the next step. And yeah, I think investing in video is something that is not new and not novel, but becoming more and more critical and important as a brand.
Absolutely, especially because as it like that relates to what you're talking about earlier with AI. I mean, investing in high quality and professional video, like that's what cuts through the noise that you mentioned. Like being able to create content or focus on a marketing strategy that cuts through that noise and being able to use video in your different marketing channels and initiatives is totally a good way to do that.
Definitely. And there are so many, dare I say, crappy AI created videos out there that it is becoming more and more critical to have the high quality, well thought out, strategic, personal videos because those just stand out so much more.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And as you're continuing to totally excel and rocket in marketing with working with startups, I would love to hear you shout out someone in the tech space that you've been really admiring or appreciating lately, whether it's another consultant or a founder or even a VC that you think deserves to get some credit and recognition.
Sure. I have been really enjoying Startup Boston as an organization. I think they offer so many, often free resources to the Boston startup community. There's actually startup, I'm going to be on a panel in Boston in September, I believe, is their Startup Boston Week. And it just seems like an incredible group of people. Any founder in the Boston area, I highly recommend getting involved. There are resources that you can't even think of that they're offering. And it's just a great group of people. Highly recommend.
A good shout out. Startup Boston is amazing. So for anyone in New England, because I think they service all the New England states, totally a good organization to check out. Stephanie and her team are offering an immense amount of resource and values for startups and founders and anyone really in this space. So I'm glad that you mentioned them.
Yes, yes.
Bethany, this has been such a fun episode, and I've really enjoyed having you come on and talk about all things marketing in the tech and startup space. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
Absolutely. So on LinkedIn, you can find me. I'm Bethany Fiocchi Root. My website is oceanview-marketing.com, and you can find us, Oceanview on all the other platforms, LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much for having me, Ashley. This has been incredible.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. I really appreciate your expertise and time today.
Thank you.